Hey everybody, Rob here. It's time for another story from the ProRevenge archives. Bully Landlord gets it in the end. Let's jump right in. Thank you for subscribing, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. My first husband was not a very nice man. For 6 years, I was belittled and basically a baby factory for him. He was a fantastic father, but a horrible husband. After he finally got his heirs, I was then treated even worse until I finally woke up and decided to leave his butt. This revenge story is not about him, I just had to set the scene. I moved out from the house, taking just my clothes, the car, 4K value no more, and the computer. I had nothing. Stayed at a girlfriend's for a couple weeks before I was able to line up a crappy townhouse with roommates. I had no furniture, and my bed was a cat pee smelling free couch I was able to score. I wound up having 3 to 4 jobs, with one of them being a full-time, and once a week, I would not even be able to sleep a night between jobs, meaning having to stay up for almost 48 hours. Now, fast forward 1 year, my divorce was finalized, and I had fulfilled my year's lease for the townhouse. By this time, from all my hard work, I had furnished the home, my bedroom, and my kids' room when they would be with me for visitation. The scumbag landlord was a nicest landlord during the time of my tenancy, and I was a good tenant, never being late with my rent. Although I had roommates, I was the sole name on the lease. Scumbag landlord would show up often with some guys that he had to work on something like plumbing tests or whatever excuse he could come up with just so he could be all creepy and hang around, trying to converse with me with mild sexual undertones that made me quite uneasy at times. Finally, the lease was fulfilled and I was now onto a month-to-month contract, to which at that time I was ready to move out of this crappy townhouse and found a great house in the mountains nearby, and I was simply thrilled now that I had got my feet on the ground and can afford a bit better than slum living. My lease stated that I had to give 1 month's notice in order to move out. Unfortunately, I was able to get the house I was to move into for the next month, only 3 weeks away. I sent an email to Scumbag Landlord stating that I intend on moving out at the end of this month in 3 weeks, and he can try to find another tenant, but I did state that if he didn't find a tenant, I would still fulfill my legal obligation and pay next month's rent. Within 1 week, 2 weeks before I was moved out, he emailed back and stated that was very generous of my offer, but he was able to find a new tenant for the beginning of next month, and I would be off the hook. He even tipped his hand by stating that he already collected a deposit from them. Now, something happened within a couple days after that, which was no fault of my own nor my roommates. The townhouse came with its own appliances, fridge, oven, etc., including a clothes washer and a dryer on the main level. My roommate had put a load of laundry in and went to the living room to have a nap. He awoke to find that the washer had malfunctioned with the sensory switch which never stopped the water fill stage, and there was an inch of water in the kitchen and living room. He splashed through the water to turn off the washer and called me to come and help deal with this. I was just getting off work and I whipped home to assess the damage. It was bad. There was standing water on top of the living room carpet and a good inch of water in the whole kitchen. I called Scumbag Landlord and told him the issue. By the time Scumbag Landlord showed up, I had already got most of the standing water out with the help of my roommate and friends that showed up with shop vacs. Scumbag Landlord didn't seem too upset, which was surprising for me, and had an appliance repairman come to look at the washer. The repairman even said, "Yep, here's the culprit," and showed how the dial would stick on the fill stage and wouldn't click over to the agitate stage. After replacing the dial and lubricating the whole deal, he left. The next week was chaos as I was busy trying to pack, and Scumbag Landlord had insurance guys in assessing and workers taking out the carpet and cutting 2 feet worth of the lower drywall of the whole main level. The day of the move, though I was still supposed to be there for a couple more days, Scumbag Landlord had let himself in as movers were moving out my stuff with a camera going around taking pictures of everything. I honestly thought that it was for his insurance claims, etc. I actually felt bad for Scumbag Landlord. I'm too nice. and told him that I would not ask for any of my deposit back, and he responded in front of the loading crew and my roommate, "Thank you, that's very generous of you." We parted ways, and I thought that was that. I was wrong. 2 weeks into my new home location, did scumbag landlord show up on my doorstep with a summons to appear in arbitration because he was suing me. What? On what grounds? He stated it's all in this paperwork and handed me a manila envelope with 18 pages of everything he was charging me with, all including photos. Now I know why he was going around taking pics. Nickel and diming me on everything from a bent Venetian blind that was like that when I had moved in, and some scuffs on walls, etc, etc. But then he also wanted me to pay his insurance deductible and that following month's rent. He claimed that the tenants that he had lined up backed out at the last minute, claiming that they didn't think the place would be ready in time with the new drywall and paint and so on. So he still wanted me to pay that month's rent. Really? This. I knew I was more than generous of giving him my whole deposit, and then for him to come back and sue me for thousands? He was not only claiming the damages caused by the flood, but improvements he needed to do that should never be or have been my responsibility in the first place. Even cracks in the living room wall that was from the building settling. How should I be responsible for that? Even new lighting, faucets, etc. All mainly on the accusation that I was negligent. I wasn't going to have that. I know it was a slummy townhouse complex and most of his tenants were on welfare, and maybe he could get away doing this with others, but not me. No way. I had just got out of a marriage that made me feel insignificant and had horrible self-esteem. But now I had my dignity and felt strong for the first time in a long time. No way was I going to let any more happen to me without my doing something about it. I had 10 days before the date of my arbitration meeting. I immediately got to work, first getting a signed deposition from the very repairman that had showed that day, stating that the appliance was quite in need of maintenance work, and the last time he had done any maintenance for him was almost 5 years before. From thoroughly reviewing my rental contract and local laws, scumbag landlord is obligated to have all appliances maintained and serviced every year. I had also talked to some of the other tenants and had heard that this wasn't the first time scumbag lawyer had sued tenants after the fact. I hunted them down and got sworn statements from them also. Unfortunately for them, they didn't know what to do and mostly didn't show up at arbitration, hence scumbag lawyer winning by default. No way, I was not going to let him do this to me. I then drew up a rebuttal to each and every claim he had, including photos from the year plus that I had lived there, printed out all my email correspondence, and even convinced my ex-roommate and one of the movers that heard my interaction with scumbag lawyer about him stating how generous it was of me letting him keep my whole deposit, which was a significant amount to come. Day of arbitration, I dressed up in my power suit and with my ex-roommate and worker in tow showed up at the meeting. Now, in Canada, arbitration is not held in a courtroom per se, but it's still held at the courthouse in a conference room with a judge. We had 1 hour with this judge. Since scumbag lawyer was the plaintiff, he got to go first with his case. He spent over 40 minutes going over everything, and I sat quietly until he finished. Once he finished, I then hauled out the rebuttal in multiple copies, handed to the judge, to scumbag lawyer, and anyone else that wished to have one, and I quickly went over each point. Scumbag lawyer was irate and interrupted almost every second sentence I spoke. I would pause the moment he would start talking and say sweetly, "I was quiet and polite during your time to present your case. I hope you grant me the same respect." Scumbag lawyer started to get red in the face, especially when I got to the deposition of the maintenance worker for the appliance. I included with that the Tenancy and Landlord Act sections pertaining to appliance maintenance and stated that this was the only record of maintenance that had occurred. And unless he can come up with more recent records from perhaps another company, it was over 5 years since anything had been looked at. With my defense, I had also then countered that I would like my deposit back and my day's pay from work since I had to take that day off to go to this meeting. The judge then made his statement, and I will always remember this for the rest of my life. He stated that first, he was very impressed of my presentation, and that I obviously have a good handle on things and can tell that my nature is of kindness and respect, especially with the photos of how I had the townhouse furnished and clean and pride in whatever home I would live in. Bottom line, not only did I win my case, I wound up having Scumbag Lawyer owing my over 80% of my deposit back, including interest. Scumbag Lawyer's face was priceless. The judge then proceeded to tell Scumbag Lawyer that they will be reviewing again all his previous filings, and if there was enough evidence of harassment, he would be reported to the Board of Landlords and Tenants. I don't really know if anything came out of that. Now, I walked away that day feeling on top of the world, completely justified, and he got a taste of his own medicine. But it didn't stop there. Oh no. Knowing that this guy has a history of suing tenants, I printed up my final results and judge's signature and gave a copy to each and every tenant in that complex. I wanted to warn everyone his practices and to keep notes, photos, etc. so that he couldn't do that to them. But I didn't stop there. He still now owed me money, and I asked repeatedly for the payment. He never responded. He had until a certain day to pay me back my deposit, and on that day, I had gone to his house. I looked up his residence under public records, as he is a landlord and had to file under a certain address, and knocked on the door. He didn't answer, though I knew he was home. I rang the bell a few more times and knocked loudly. He then turned his house alarm on, which at first startled me, but quickly turned to humor, seeing how much of a pussy this bully turned out to be. I then yelled out loud enough that I am not going anywhere. He yelled out, "Get off my property or I will call the police." Okay, no problem. I got off the property, but camped out on the front sidewalk. I had a fold-up chair, a cooler with water and sodas, a few sandwiches, and all my paperwork with me. I was set to stay there forever. I then would tell anyone that would walk by, already there were some people there from the house alarm fiasco, about how I was a tenant and wrongfully sued me, and that I have a claim against him, and he now owes me money. I let anyone look at the paperwork just to back up my claim. The police did show up. They first went to talk to Scumbag Lawyer, and he was claiming that I was harassing him, slandering him, and wouldn't leave his property. I was on public property, sidewalk, and it isn't slander if it's true, of which I had all my court-signed paperwork to back me up. I wasn't disturbing the peace. I was simply and quietly seated outside his home and just talking to neighbors about his actions. He was out yelling that I need to leave, and I quietly stated that I would be happy to leave once I am paid, that he was legally obligated to do by that date. I was not going to leave before I got my money in my hand, and I was more than willing to stay there and tell anyone that would listen to me why I was camped out. The police stated I wasn't doing anything wrong, that it's public property. I wasn't disturbing the peace, and it isn't slander if it's true. Finally, after an hour of Scumbag Lawyer yelling on his front lawn at the policemen, and at me of course, did his wife come out with money. She handed the money to the police, of which in turn handed the money to me and signed off, documenting final payment was complete. I sweetly smiled, thanked the police deeply, and went home. I have no idea what ever happened to Scumbag Lawyer, and if he is still pulling like this on others, but I hope that I helped put the fear of God in him, that he just can't screw with people, because eventually it will come and bite him in the ass. Sometimes nice guys or girls finish last, but with patience, they finish with a win. One of the comments below this story summed it up perfectly. It says, "My friend, I hope you value yourself enough to seek a career that highlights your skills. You would make an excellent lawyer or investigator. Law enforcement also needs people with a strong sense of justice. You fought your way out of hell, persevered to make it on your own, and got justice for yourself and possibly that man's future victims. I'm so proud of you. Live your very best life and conquer every obstacle with that same level of determination. You've got this. I want to thank OP for posting their story to the ProRevenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one.